Hi, everyone. Thank you for listening tonight. And thank you, Pamela, for convincing me to do something that I don't normally do. My name is Diné. As you can hear by my accent, I am a South African, but I'm currently living in London in the UK with my husband. That's us visiting a castle, also as one does, and that is the new baby. Well, she's not that new anymore. She's almost a year old. I am an engineering manager at Luno, and tonight I'm going to try and share a little bit about my engineering journey with you so far. So I was racking my brains. Oh, just an aside, if Malcolm Gladwell is right, it takes about 10,000 hours to be good at something, which means that I am about 9,999 hours short of being a good public speaker. So please bear with me as I practice this. I was thinking about what I could tell you tonight that was possibly interesting or useful. And after thinking about it for a while, I decided that maybe I would tell you about 3 times that I almost gave up on engineering and why I didn't. So I graduated back in the day with a degree in electrical and computer engineering. And to set the scene, software was very different back then. We didn't have Facebook yet. We only had MySpace. We didn't have iPhones. We only had Blackberries. And we didn't have Github for version control. We had to use something called SVN or Subversion. So I took my first job at an electronics company. And this was very exciting for me. I got to program all sorts of real-world devices like electricity meters and telephone exchanges, and even this drone in the picture here. It was really good experience writing code that reads voltages from all sorts of sensors, like pressure sensors and temperature sensors, and code that produces other voltages that control real-life things like servo mechanisms. I would definitely recommend embedded systems programming to anyone because it really helped solidify some of the fundamentals of computer science for me that I'd learned in university. And it also taught me early on to be very careful with my code because if I made a mistake, if there was a bug, it could, for example, lead to a plane falling out the sky. So this was a great job. It was a great experience. And I did it for a couple of years. But after a while, I just wasn't as happy as I thought I should be. And I didn't know why at the time. I didn't know what was happening. But looking back, it does kind of make sense. I was one of a few women in a big building with lots of floors filled with men, and I stuck out like a sore thumb a lot of the time. So I spent a lot of energy just trying to sort of fit in and fly under the radar and basically trying to be more masculine, as you can see on my previous slide. So yeah, so I just wasn't very happy. And I had maybe 1 or 2 friends, female friends who were engineers, but I had no role models really. I didn't know any senior engineers who were women or any engineering managers who were women. And social networking wasn't what it was today. So I hadn't yet encountered some of the wonderful women like Tracy Chu and Amy Wabowo, who later their writing and their talks would mean a lot to me. So I was feeling kind of exhausted, just trying to figure out where I fit into this very masculine world of software engineering. And I thought maybe this career wasn't going to be for me. 2 important things happened around about that time. The first is that I watched Sheryl Sandberg's TED Talk for the first time. I think it's called Why We Have Too Few Women Leaders. And I know that she's kind of a controversial figure these days, but back then that talk meant a lot to me because it was the first time I heard someone talk about things like the confidence gap. And suddenly it began to make sense to me why my male colleagues seemed so confident in everything they did when I felt so not confident. She also spoke about things like leaving before you leave, which is basically when women start to hang back in their careers because they start to make space for family and for babies that might come later on, long before that's actually happening, which was something that always stayed with me to this day. But the most important thing is that I realized there were many other women around the world who were experiencing a similar thing to what I was experiencing, and there was nothing wrong with me. I wasn't alone, and other women face these challenges all the time. So I knew then that I had to make an effort to stay connected to other women, and thankfully the internet was making that easier and easier. So I made an effort to always be part of book clubs and lenient circles and meetups like this one, where women could share their stories and just support each other. And that's me at an all-women hackathon a few years ago. The second thing that happened around about that time was that a friend encouraged me to interview for an engineering job at a technology NGO called Cell Life that had just started out of UCT. I was much happier in this job. The team was much more diverse, as you can see, and it was a relief to be working on a team of people who didn't all look the same. I felt much more connected to my colleagues, much more connected to the products we were working on, and I was definitely much happier. But along came another fork in the road then. As part of my job at Cell Life, I worked on an open source data collection tool that was used by health workers. And this was a community, an open source community that was distributed across different countries across the world. It was a really great experience. It taught me so much about code collaboration, about how to do good pull requests, how to follow the processes of the community. And I definitely learned a lot. I would, again, recommend working on open source software, especially if you want to get better at code collaboration. But the downside of all of this was that I found myself day in and day out, week after week, faced with some harsh code reviews and little or no encouragement from the other engineers in the community, because we were distributed, and also no personal interaction with those engineers. So I'm quite sensitive, so this was hard. And it really came to a head for me one day when one of the senior engineers was lecturing me about a mistake I made in my pull request. And he just kept saying over and over again that everybody knows this is not how you do things. Maybe this will relate to the other talk later on. So yeah, I just felt really discouraged. And I thought perhaps I didn't have what it takes to be an engineer after all. So I enrolled in a master's degree, part-time in information systems, because I thought I should start moving my career away from engineering and towards something else. Ironically, doing this master's degree kept me in the same job because they gave really good study leave, and I could kind of keep studying and keep working as well. And while I kept coding and working and just writing code and Stack Overflowing and learning from my mistakes, I started to learn something very important that I think I knew in theory, but I really started learning it in practice. And that is that the phrase, "everybody knows this," is a lie. No one is born being a good engineer, as much as some people would like you to think this about them. And it's something we get better at as we study and work and learn from our mistakes. So I realized that if I love building things that have the potential to change people's lives and to bring them joy, then I should keep being an engineer, even if I'm not the smartest and most knowledgeable engineer that ever walked the planet. So I finished my master's degree and I decided to stay in engineering. I did a couple of other jobs after this. So more recently, I spent time at Zona in Cape Town. We were working on financial products that were used by customers in rural parts of Malawi, Zambia, and Mozambique, which was really interesting. And this was also my first job working in a startup that did big funding rounds. So the environment was quite competitive and high pressure, but I really loved the challenge. This was also the first time that I got to be the lead in some of my software engineering teams, which was also a fantastic experience for me. And most days I really loved this job. Because we worked in an agile team that was very focused on solving customer and business problems. We got to travel to the field and meet our customers, which was really interesting. And we got to really feel as engineers the impact that our work, our successes and our failure made on the customers and on the business. Again, this is something I'd really recommend, is working on these kind of problem-focused teams, because I really learned a lot. I'm really rushing through my talk here. I don't know why. Nerves. So towards the end of my time at Zona, I worked on a big project where we basically wrote the core financial platform of the company, and we also launched a new consumer app on Android that I was working on. I had a key role in the team, and it was really exhilarating and exciting working on this big launch, but I was also burning out. I was trying to take on more and more management responsibilities while still trying to do a lot of or almost all the technical work I was doing before myself as well. My husband and I had been trying to fall pregnant, and we had a failed pregnancy over this time. And basically, I was just really struggling to maintain or to manage my stress. So once again, I just thought maybe this world of tech, maybe this world of being an engineer is just too much for me in the long run. And maybe this isn't where I belong. And so I did what one does in those situations, and I took a holiday. I went to visit a friend of mine in the States. So this is if you can see the slide, this is me in New York. And I just sort of slowed down and started thinking about what I wanted to do next. And it was around that time that I realized that maybe it was okay for me to start moving away from trying to be the superstar individual contributor who sits in the corner and writes more code than anyone else does. I think for many years I've been so afraid that people wouldn't see me as technical, and I really made an effort to spend most of my energy doing technical work and writing code, which was great, and I'm really glad I did that, and I could have carried on doing that because it was fantastic. But I just realized that this wasn't the only definition of a successful engineer. And as an aside, if this is something that you've been thinking about, I would recommend a talk called Being Glue by Tanya Riley. That was really helpful to me. So I knew that I could either carry on focusing on IC work if I wanted to, and that would be great. But I knew that I could also take on a different role in a different team if I want to. Basically, I realized I can do what I want to do, which sounds really silly, but I think as women, we sometimes hold on so hard to this picture of what we think we should be and what we think success is, whether that's our own expectation or someone else's expectation. And sometimes it can be quite hard to let go of that. So a few months later, I was really excited to take on a new role at Luno in the web engineering team. And I was also lucky enough to land a manager who encouraged me to keep sort of exploring different roles in our engineering team. So ultimately, I decided that I did want to try out the management track, which was a big change for me. But I'm so glad I did, because I've found it really fulfilling and really rewarding so far. So I'm really glad that I gave myself the freedom to evolve and to do something new. I'm also really glad I stayed in tech. Having a baby and coming back has been challenging, and that's probably the subject of another talk. But I'm really happy with where my career is at the moment. And I'm so glad that everything's sort of aligned, that I didn't end up giving up on engineering. And that is the end of my talk tonight. That's my journey so far. So thank you so much for listening, for giving me this opportunity. And if you want to be friends, please get in touch.
Thank you, Diné. That was really awesome. So guys, if you would like to ask Diné a question, please use the chat window on the right-hand side of your stream to ask some questions. And while you're busy typing away, we'll give you 1 or 2 minutes. I'm going to ask Diné some other questions. So Diné, you mentioned a whole bunch of resources. Can you just tell us about your favorite books? You know, your favorite business books that you've read and that's been really influential for you.
Business books. I think, so I mentioned Sheryl Sandberg's TED Talk, and again, her book is possibly a bit outdated now, but her book Lean In was really, really inspirational for me at the time. The other resources are not so much books, but maybe I can link to some articles. There's an article called Coding Like a Girl by Amy Wabowo that was really influential for me. And there's another one by Tracy Chu. I forget the title now, but I'll share it. But basically, I think what I've just loved is reading other women's stories and hearing their challenges and sort of not feeling alone in that.
That's great. Okay, so Ntabi Singh is going to ask you a question. Let's just put it on the screen. Thanks for sharing. The question for me is, what were the major challenges that when you moved from being a dev to managing devs?
it really is just a totally different job. So everything was challenging. Yeah, it would be tough to pick one thing. I think maybe the sort of success metrics that you have as an engineer or as a developer is your pull request, your code, your features that you're shipping, and then suddenly when you're not doing those things hands-on day to day, you have to find new success metrics. And that's been, I still haven't quite solved that, so that's been quite challenging. But yeah, but also refreshing to kind of take a different perspective on things.
And then Etienne was asking, what are some of the engineering management wisdoms that can give you energy and joy that you manage to collect throughout your journey?
Oh, that's a tough one, putting me on the spot, Etienne. I think I once heard someone I haven't actually read that book, but the How to Win Friends and Influence People. And I heard someone summarize it as just you have to find out what other people care about and then care about that. Oh, there we go, nice one. So I think just really listening to people and really finding out what they care about, whether it's your manager or the CEO of the company or the people you manage. I think that's one piece of hopefully wisdom that I've learned recently.
Okay, and then there was just one last question from Diné. What was the talk you recommended by Tanya Riley?
It's called Being Glue. You can Google it, but what I'll do is I'll put all these resources on Meetup maybe as well and link to them. But hopefully if you just Google Being Glue, it should come up.
Cool. I think that's it for our questions tonight because we still have two other talks to get through. But thank you so much, Diné. Have a lovely evening and look after little baby very well. But thank you so much. You did awesomely. And that was her first talk ever, ladies and gentlemen. Congratulations. Yay!
Thanks, everyone. Okay. Thanks, Pam.